Did I ever tell you that when I turned 21, I pursued professional wrestling? Anybody? Seriously, it happened. 21 years old, 6 foot tall, 155 pounds of thin air, practically. And I pursued professional wrestling. Over the next couple of weeks, I'm going to take you through my journey of professional wrestling, a business that's tough on a lot of people, and you need true dedication. You need to be willing to work hard. You need to have tough skin. Let's begin. So before we begin, let's set the tone. You want to see the greatest wrestling promo in wrestling history? Check this out.
April 23rd, 2010, EWA returns to Parkville with Collision Course. And your EWA Maryland champion, Anshay the Spider Silva, has just been informed that he's facing not one man, not two men, but three men for my Maryland championship. And I'm not just talking any three guys. I'm talking Thomas Farnsworth, Kindred of the Hit Squad, and Chase Rawlins, the former EWA Maryland champion. And when I think about those three, I think three great talents. I mean, Farnsworth knows how to get it done in the ring. Kindred's big physical guy, huge. And Chase, well, he's the former champion. So I have a tall test ahead of me. And on paper, I'm the underdog. But as I'm sure you've all heard before, wrestling isn't done on paper, it's done in a wrestling ring. So in 1 week, I'm going to step up to the plate. In 1 week, I'm going to show everybody what Spider Silva's all about. And in 1 week, I'm going to walk into Parkville, Maryland champion, and I'm going to walk out of Parkville, EWA Maryland champion.
Yeah. Not so much, huh? So, if you follow my videos, or if you've seen any of my videos or listened to any of the stories I've told, you pretty much know that I'm a huge wrestling fan and I'm a big gamer. I collect wrestling figures, and I have for years upon years at this point. And I started watching wrestling back in, I want to say 1996, around that time, watching Superstars in the mornings with my grandpa and seeing people like Mankind and The Undertaker when they used to have like separate character backdrops in the background. So I've always been into wrestling when I was young, and as I got older, you know, it just got stronger for me. And when I turned 17, I was, got my first little computer and searched on the internet and saw like a fantasy camp for a local wrestling promotion. So I called them to see, if I was able to join, and I was, but of course I didn't have transportation. And my family, they weren't backing me on any of this, so I couldn't make it. So it wasn't until I was able to, drive on my own, get a car and get a license, that I was able to, pursue this on my own. And by that time, I was 21 years of age. So I did an online search of different, wrestling schools in the area. There was one in, Hagerstown, Maryland, which is probably about an hour from me. And there was one about a half hour from me called Eastern Wrestling Alliance. So I can't remember if I sent an email or if I called, but I want to say that I called and spoke to the promoter, and you know, he talked about, you know, the cost of wrestling school, which was, I believe, $2,500 at the time, which is super expensive. Even with me being 21 years of age, I'm in college, I work part-time, so that's a lot of money. So I asked my grandpa if he would advance me the $500 to put down to join this wrestling school, and he did, which I was super excited about. And I was able to pay my down payment and pretty much start training immediately. So at that point, I was a pretty athletic kid. I was 6 feet tall and like 150 pounds, but I went to the gym on a regular basis. I had decent cardio, and I was in shape. I was a little tight, but I was super lanky, as I am now. Like, my arms are freaking long and lanky, and they pretty much always will be at this point. But I went to training and met some really cool people. But the first thing that I realized when I stepped into that ring is that taking bumps, as we call them, on the mat is not a pleasant feeling. Like, you don't want to throw yourself onto the mat, and you don't want to flip on the mat. There's just a lot of things that my body was telling me that I did not want to do. And especially taking flips and landing on my back was something that my body was telling me that I should not do. But I pushed through. This was a part of my life that I love because I met some really good people, and it's probably gotten me in the best shape of my life, because pro wrestling is not easy. If it's done correctly and you're trained correctly, it's not easy, and it shouldn't be easy. So we had a normal like training regimen that we would go through, you know, before we would get in the ring and do technique and moves and stuff like that. Typically we would run laps around the parking lot until it equaled like a mile, and then we would do the typical sit-ups, push-ups, jumping jacks. We would do our stretches, and when I first started, that was pretty much it of what we did before we got into the ring. The one thing that I do want to say is when I first started wrestling, you couldn't get any sound out of me. I was like a mime. It was absolutely no sound coming out of my body. You could hit me as hard as you want. Chop, punch, slap, pinch, anything. You could not get a sound out of me. And looking back, part of that is probably because I was, I guess, nervous or embarrassed to like show out in front of other people, because I was pretty reserved way back when. Reserved, and I didn't want to be like laughed at or anything like that. So I was super quiet, and it showed also in my character. So there was a long time, probably maybe a year and a half went by, where I could have been working in front of a crowd, working shows, but instead I was in the ring, you know, taking clothesline after elbow, because you couldn't get any sound out of me. And then that kind of hindered my performance, so to speak. So it took me about a year and a half to actually get in front of a crowd and actually do something in front of a crowd. And when that time came, I didn't have any ring gear. I didn't have a name, a look, a character, or anything. So I actually went out in these like pinstripe black and white shorts with a studded belt, and I looked absolutely ridiculous. If I had the video to show you how ridiculous I looked, I would show you. But I wound up taking the name of Anderson Silva, actually. And it wasn't something that I chose to do. It was something that one of the promoters just called me just out of the blue. Because at the time, I had a little six-pack, and I was slender and slim like Anderson Silva, short, buzz haircut. And I poured some like water all over my body, so I was like glistening and all that silly stuff. And that name sort of stuck. When I first started to work free shows, as we call them, shows where people just come to watch you for free at the training center, like I said, I didn't have any gear, so I quickly had to reach out to somebody to try to get something made. And funny is, one of my old friends referred me to a guy in Australia named Tic Tac Sam. And Tic Tac Sam, who I've become, better friends with over the years, actually makes some amazing wrestling attire. And he actually has done some work for some guys in WWE and some guys in TNA. So he's perfected his craft, and he's gotten his name out there. And I guess there's like an Australian wrestling promotion that he does a lot of things for. I think it's called AWP Australia, and I know they have a Facebook, but it's been a while since I've talked to Tic Tac. I'm not sure if he's still doing wrestling attire, but these are the first pair of tights that I ever received from Tic Tac. Something quick that I needed, and it just had like a spider web on the back of them, and then there's his logo there, and just regular, like high biker shorts is what I wore. And he made me these kick pads that said Spider on them, and these are the first pieces of wrestling attire that I ever had, and I'll never get rid of these because these are the first. These are the first. So once I got my attire, I started working, free shows, and luckily for me, I actually had some decent matches on free shows. Because while I was super quiet and reserved, I feel like I had a pretty decent moveset compared to a lot of, the other trainees that were in my classes. Actually, there were quite a few people in my class who were better than I was move-wise, because they had everything. They had the personality, they had the charisma, they had the look, and they had the moves too. I was just a skinny, athletic kid who could jump really high. So for me, I kind of skated through on that alone without having a personality. There was actually one guy who would always say, no charisma, because I was just a normal guy. There was nothing about me that was special. But I kind of tried to let my in-ring work sell me more so than my personality. Like, do my talking in the ring. And that's going to wrap it up for part 1 of this story. But before I go, I'm going to leave you with my very first singles match at a free show at my very first wrestling training facility. Believe me, a lot of changes are made in in the coming stories, so stay tuned for that. Once again, this is NTCertified. Thank you for watching. I appreciate you. Please like, comment, subscribe, and catch me next week for part 2 of my wrestling saga. Peace.
Let's go, Human Tornado! Shut up! Okay, let's go, Casper!
We go much faster. Let's go make the difference later.
Come on!
Try to get past, Brad.
Yes.
Stop being the first player. He's gonna get squashed. Get him!
Two.
What? Go deal.
Let's go.